You're now listening to the Boys in the Booth podcast with your hosts, Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts.
Good evening. Welcome to episode 106 of the pod. Cody and Melbourne with you. No Casey Abrams for this one. He's feeling a little under the weather, so that's okay. It'll just be the two of us chatting with you on this Monday night as we're recording, making our way through November. And Chad, how's it going, man? You've got a pretty interesting t-shirt on there.
That's right. I picked up this Believe in New York, this New York Rangers t-shirt at Value Village last weekend for, I think it was $2.99 or in and around that price range there. And I actually wore it because I know Casey just hates the Rangers. And so I was expecting to kind of tease him with this shirt today and be like, hey, like, look at me, I'm a big Rangers fan. But, you know, too bad he's not joining us this time. I'll have to get him next time. So that's the story behind this shirt here. But other than that, you know, like things are pretty good, man. It's been, you know, another week of hockey and another week of the Maple Leafs. My Maple Leafs doing pretty well. So, like, I can't really complain about what I'm seeing on the ice, except for I would like to see some more goals out of the Maple Leafs. That's all I'll say. But they're winning, and they're winning in tight, low-scoring games, which, you know, those are the types of wins that translate to the playoffs. So I'm pretty happy, honestly. Joseph Woll got his first NHL win and his first NHL shutout since we last spoke in his first two games. So those things are amazing as well. So yeah, overall, just like really pleased with the Maple Leafs and just life overall. But how about you, man? Like how are things been the last week?
I'm doing good. This week is, back to normal, back into the swing of things. I was off all of last week, as you know, coming off of, being up in Toronto with you and Paige and Meg there last weekend. So back into the swing of things. And man, you should be really happy with the Leafs right now. We won't spend too much time on them because we've got lots to get to. Yeah. But another thing for me is like just how well the combo of Ondrej Kase and David Kampf have been for the Maple Leafs. I saw a story today just about their emergence, and turns out they're pretty close buddies as well. So that's great to see. You should be happy. And I mean, for me, you know, the Sabres played last night as well, and tough loss against the Rangers. The shirt you've got on there, they gave up the game winner by the Rangers with 0.4 seconds remaining in regulation. So that was tough to see. But other than that, doing good, man. Well,
Harp, wasn't that, and I want to touch on Kase and Kampf as well, but wasn't that game the game where it was like a minute 22 in the game and there were 4 goals scored between the Sabres and the Rangers? Like, what? Yeah. That, were you watching that? Like, I didn't see it. I saw highlights of it, but a minute 22 or something, 4 goals scored.
Yeah, it was a shootout, man, and I didn't watch it live, but I saw the highlights, and just absolutely crushed by the goal with 0.4 seconds remaining in regulation.
Yeah, that's brutal. And so quickly on Kampf and Kase, so Kampf is on a 2-year deal, and he's in the first year of it. Kase is on a 1-year deal. But like, get this guy signed. Like, he is playing out of his mind, and like, this is the Kase that we thought maybe we could get in terms of like production and stuff, but really weren't sure because of his injury history and whatever. So we've seen the Maple Leafs take a few flyers on guys and kind of reach into the bargain bin with guys like, you know, Michael Bunting and Kase and Kampf and Ritchie even, and like, some of them have hit. I want to say Bunting has hit. Kampf has definitely hit, and Kase is the number 1. So the guy who I didn't include there is Nick Ritchie, and he makes the most out of all of them. So I'm looking at next year, and I'm looking at the cap situation. I think, Richie is a guy who might be disposable, and who knows, by the end of the year, he might prove me wrong. But if you could sign Kasha to term, like, to what Richie is signed with, I would be one very happy boy. That's for sure.
No, that's great to see. All right, man, great stuff, and we'll get into the meat and potatoes of this episode 106. So let's start with a little fantasy corner. We'll go there to start, and then a little cap or no cap, and we're going to talk about Connor McDavid and more magic from him last week, and so we'll get to that to wrap up the episode. So, fantasy corner. I have to say congratulations to you because you absolutely cleaned my clock last week in fantasy. I think you beat me by close to 50 points in our matchup. And one guy in particular who's slumping right now, and, I've listened to a couple of podcasts talking about the player maybe being traded out of Minnesota, is Kevin Fiala. So again, I'm kind of reiterating what I said last week. I've got a lot of forwards that just aren't doing it for me right now, man. So 1-5 record, and I am. Let's see who I'm up against this week. I am up against Shipping and Yandling, and they're 4-2 coming into our matchup this week. So I got to figure it out, man.
You definitely do. And Shipping and Yandling is that's my buddy Remy. He's got a great squad. So I haven't seen the projection between like the two of you for this week, but you're in tough there. Like, he's got a good team, so something's got to give. Like, Fiala has to start producing, or maybe it's Barzal. That's another guy who was having a bit of a disappointing season. And by the way, I was listening to, I watch all the LFR videos by Steve Dangle, and he had this to say about Barzal. He said, when I was watching him the other night playing against the Maple Leafs, I can't believe this guy isn't 1.5 points per game. He said something to that effect. And I thought to myself, yeah, like, he looks so dangerous on the ice. We know how good he is at entering the zone and leading those entries to scoring chances. He's one of the best in the league, if not the best. But he does that, but he just hasn't been able to score this year. I think it must be, like, maybe it's the last change. You mentioned on, on Instagram how the Islanders haven't played at home at all yet, and then they played their two first games there at their new arena. But so there's a lot of factors, I guess, working against the Islanders, who have gotten off to a poor start. But Barzal is for sure a guy who needs to pick it up if you're going to have some success in fantasy here. Yeah, I pumped you last week, Harp. There's no getting around it here. I pumped you. I beat you by 46.5 points. So it was 186 roughly to 140 roughly, and so it wasn't even close. Sorry about that. But another week and another win for the multiple scoregasms here. I am cruising, and not only am I sitting in second place now, still behind Luke's Meatheads, which is ridiculous. I can't believe he's 6-0. His time has to come soon. But I'm also sitting in first place in total points, which is a good sign for me. So as soon as I get that record up and at least tie the Meatheads, maybe after this week, we'll both be 6-1-0. Who knows? I've got a tough matchup, but at least then I'll get the benefit of the doubt because I'll have more points for. So I'm looking forward to that. Speaking of my matchup this week, though, I'm against the Bacchus Door Bandits, and that's Taylor Prosser.
Yeah.
Dude, he has a good team as well. Like, I'm just looking at his team, and he's got a lot of guys who you might not think, like, off the bat, when you first hear them, are like great players, but there's a difference between a great player and a great fantasy player. They don't always overlap. So he's got some guys, like a Josh Norris, very underrated fantasy player. Logan Couture as well, wins a ton of faceoffs and is in there all the time. And Gabe Landeskog, very underrated because he hits a ton. And then he also has some typical, superstars who, are going to put up points and fantasy points, like Connor McDavid. Ever heard of him? We're going to talk about him this episode. And also John Carlson on the back end. So he's got a good squad. Mm-hmm. I am projected to beat him right now by about 30 points. But as we know, these projections, like, you never know how they're going to turn out. So I've got my fingers crossed here. I'm looking to take over Luke's number one spot here in the league. But as it sits right now, I'm pretty confident with my fantasy team, and I think I need a loss maybe to kind of knock me down a peg, because I'm just cruising right now. 5 straight dubs.
Nice. There you go. All right. Looking forward to week 7 this week of the Boys in the Booth Fantasy Hockey League. Okay, Chadwick, let's get to cap or no cap.
Hold on. Sorry, before we do, I should mention last week we ran through the top 5. So in our fantasy league, just before we get away from the fantasy corner.
Oh, right. Yes. Okay. Go ahead. Yeah.
And so this week we'll do bottom 5. And it's kind of the similar suspects down there. In last place, you've got the mail order brides at 0-6-0. That's Corey. He's got to pick it up. In 13th place, second last, we've got the Arizona Blackhawks, and that's my brother-in-law Cameron, who couldn't beat the Meatheads last week, so that was too bad. Yeah. In 12th place, third last, we've got the 2021 Pepsi Cup scoring champ, and that's you, my friend, Mr. Harper Cody. In 11th, fourth last place, we've got the Hornytown OnlyFans 1-5-0, same record as you, a few more total points, and that's Brandon Irving. And then in the 10th spot, so fifth last, we've got Barkov's Beauties, and that's Luke Vanderbeeren, LVB, with a record of 2-4-0. So that's the bottom 5. Again, we'll keep alternating. Next week we'll do the top 5. Week after that we'll do the bottom, just to kind of keep it fresh and to update you guys on the league. So okay, go ahead, Harp. Sorry, with cap or no cap, just wanted to make sure we get that out there.
No, perfect. I forgot that's how we're wrapping that up. So no, that's great, Chad. Okay, cap or no cap. So
you're now listening to Cap or No Cap right here on the Boys in the Booth podcast.
No cap, this shit bussin'.
So, look, and I want to focus on the Vancouver Canucks because they're struggling. 6-11-2 in 19 games to start the season, 7th in the Pacific. So, cap or no cap, Jim Benning and Travis Green, GM and coach, will be out of the Canucks organization by the end of the season. Cap or no cap, Chad?
I'm gonna give you a hard cap on that one. I don't think that they will be out of the organization by the end of the season, and this is only because I can't remember the last time the Vancouver Canucks made a GM or coaching change in the middle of the season. So Jim Benning has been there since, I want to say 2012. I could be wrong. It's in and around that year. Like, he's been there a long time. And if we're talking about coaching changes, like, I can't remember. And I was listening to, I forget which podcast I was listening to, but it was brought up as well that, like, they don't change coaches in the middle of the season. And so that's why I'm saying cap. But if you want my opinion, I think they should change both the coach and the GM. And I think that's fair to say because they've been abysmal this season, but they have so much talent. And it's just so frustrating because you look at their top 6 and there aren't many better top 6s in the NHL. You look at their back end and it's like, it could be better. Like, I'm not sure about the OEL signing. He hasn't looked great this year, or trade rather. And then you look at their goaltending, and again, it's like one of the better tandems in the NHL. And really, it's not even a tandem because Thatcher Demko is probably going to make the U.S. Olympic team. He's one of the best goalies in the NHL. He's been phenomenal this year, but he hasn't got much support. So, like, you look at that team and you're like, they should not be in the basement of a shitty Pacific division. They should be at the top. Like, no, seriously, like, they're a good enough team, but yeah, you look at the coaching. Well, first of all, it all goes back to Jim Benning, the GM. There have been like chants, fire Benning at the games, and like, rightfully so. You haven't been able to bring this team into the playoffs and do anything of significance in the playoffs since 2011 when they made the Cup final and lost to the Bruins. And that's 10 years ago now. So when you've been at the helm for that long and you haven't had any success, the fans are going to want something more. So that's the GM. But then it also comes down to coaching, right? And one of the main things I see, and whether this is a GM thing or a coaching thing or both, I think it probably has to do with a little bit of both, is that they don't have any defensemen who can generate offense aside from the obvious Quinn Hughes. So you look at Elias Pettersson this year, and I was looking at a stat the other day. I believe it was posted by Talking Hockey on Instagram. And Elias Pettersson's chances on the breakout, so this is exiting their zone, they showed the defensemen who are passing him the puck and their zone exit abilities, and the only one who has a positive zone exit ability essentially is Quinn Hughes. So that's the problem. They can't move the puck up ice to their good players quickly enough, and then they just aren't good off the rush. They're one of the worst rush teams in the NHL, which is ridiculous because look at the players they have. They've got young, fast, skilled, talented players, but it just hasn't been working. So in this whole long-winded answer here, I want to say that I don't think they will be out by the end of the year, but I really think they should be.
Yes, and I agree with you 100%. And Pettersson is the one guy, right, who, his play so far this season is concerning. Mm-hmm. And you just wonder, watching him, has the message been lost from his head coach? And would Pettersson benefit from a new bench boss in Vancouver? And it's surprising, man. I mean, who would have thought after 19 games that they would be sitting 3 points above the Seattle Kraken in the basement of the Pacific Division, which, as you have pointed out, is a pretty wide open division after you get past Vegas, Edmonton, and you could even argue Calgary with how they're playing right now. So I agree with you. That's a good point to bring up, that if you go through the Canucks track record, they wait till the off season to make those big management and coaching changes. But man, that's a demanding market like Toronto. And I could certainly see a change here very soon if they don't turn this around. And by the way, too, their last game, 1-0 loss to Chicago. I mean, that was a great effort, and Marc-Andre Fleury was just Marc-Andre Fleury. They threw everything at him, but the results need to be there, man. At this point, you're 6-11-2 in 19 games. It was a good effort tonight, but we didn't get the result. That's not cutting it anymore with the Vancouver Canucks.
Yeah, well, the thing is, and we've talked about so many teams in the league who kind of have this same strategy. If the Canucks are going to be good, it's going to be on the back of their goaltender. And Thatcher Demko has been nothing less than sensational for most of the year this year, and they're still not winning. So that's extremely concerning. And I just want to talk about this division quickly as well before we move on. It's you look at this team and they're sitting in second last in the division, and the only team behind them is the Seattle Kraken, like you mentioned. The Seattle Kraken, first of all, I think both of these teams could still make the playoffs, and it wouldn't surprise me at all. Anaheim's been on a heater, LA's been hot, San Jose, mm-hmm. All three of those teams I don't think are playoff teams, but they've been playing well. Whereas Vancouver and Seattle, I still do think are playoff teams. The difference between the two is that, like I said, Demko has been playing phenomenal pretty much all year. There was a lapse of maybe 3-4 games, where he wasn't fantastic, but he can't win every game for you, right?
No.
But then Seattle, Grubauer and Drieger have both been abysmal. And actually, I was looking today on moneypuck.com, and my favorite stat, goals saved above expected, Philip Grubauer is dead last in the entire NHL. He's allowed roughly 15 goals, more than an average goalie would. And so that is ridiculous. And so that's why I think that Seattle still has a chance. and maybe even better than Vancouver, like if they start to turn it up. But like I said, the most concerning thing about Vancouver is that they are getting the goaltending. They just aren't able to generate offense sustainably.
Yeah, Demko's just not getting the help in front of him.
Yeah.
So we'll see what happens with the Vancouver Canucks. And I liked your answer again to the cap or no cap question. But again, I think it could be before the offseason for changes if they don't turn this around. All right, let's move on to Connor McDavid before we wrap up. And man, like we talked about that goal a couple of weeks ago against the New York Rangers, goes through four guys, the great quotes after the game. A couple weeks later, he does it again. And this time it's the Winnipeg Jets who are the victim. And like the goals were so similar. Like it is unbelievable watching this guy and how good he is and what he can do. And, you know, the Oilers look like they're the real deal this year as well, which is really important with McDavid and Draisaitl. But focusing on McDavid, and so just with what he's accomplished already, with what he's doing right now, and what he's going to accomplish in his career, if he were to retire today, where does he rank all time for you, Chad? That's the question we want to ask here.
It's such a good question, but it's such a loaded question because it is like we have no idea, you know, how to reconcile those two things. Like incredible production, but if he were to retire today, you know, he wouldn't have played very many games. So it's just so tough to say. But I want to start out this whole conversation on Connor McDavid, first of all, by saying that the guy is ridiculous, as you mentioned. Just ridiculous. Like we haven't seen scoring like this in so long, like since Lemieux days. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like since the 90s. Like it's that crazy. So yeah, so I want to start out by saying that I think it was 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, where you mentioned it on Cap or No Cap. There was a question, and you said for the statement for Cap or No Cap, Connor McDavid's goal, where he went through the four guys and scored against the Rangers, the shirt I'm wearing, will be the best goal of the season. And I think it was Casey who said, no, like that's cap, because if anyone's going to top that goal, it's going to be Connor McDavid himself with another highlight reel goal. And then, like you said, he went and did it again. Essentially the same goal. I think he went through three guys this time, but man, the guy is just ridiculous. Like I said, we haven't seen scoring like this since the 90s. So McDavid has played 424 games in the NHL in the regular season. He has 606 points. Okay.
Jeez.
That's, first of all, ridiculous. But I wanted to talk about his points per game right now, because we're talking about the whole, you know, ranking him all time. First of all, like I said off the top, it's impossible to do because it's just, you know, the sample size, sure, it's you know, around 500 games, under that. But it's still not enough compared to, you know, your Gretzky's, Lemieux, and, you know, Bossy, Bobby Orr, etc. So right now, McDavid ranks 4th all time in the NHL in terms of points per game. He has 1.429 points per game. And the three guys above him, well, number one, you know, is Wayne Gretzky at 1.921. Number two is Mario Lemieux, which I think we could have guessed that as well. Mario was plagued by injury, obviously, and cancer as well, which caused him to miss a ton of games, but he was so good, sitting at 1.883 points per game. Number three actually surprised me a bit. I thought it might be you know, a Guy Lafleur or you know, Mr. Hockey. But I guess with Mr. Hockey, you know, Gordie Howe, he played so many games, so I guess his points per game was just down a bit. But Mike Bossy at number 3 with 1.497. And then it's Connor McDavid at number 4 all time. And yes, I understand that his production will likely taper off as he gets older. But like, I'm looking at this list, man, and number 7 is Sidney Crosby, which is also ridiculous, by the way, 1.271 points per game. So McDavid, needless to say, is in terrific company on this list in terms of points per game. And in terms of overall points as well, like 600 points, 600 plus points in the NHL is nothing to scoff at, even if you play 1,000 games. You know what I mean? And he's done this in less than 500. So it's just ridiculous. I'm not going to give you a number now. I want to talk about it a bit more. But so, like, what are your thoughts on McDavid's production, and where would you place him in the overall?
I mean, like, 4th all time in points per game right now is just so impressive. And I think, like, it's either top 3 or top 5 all time for me. Like, right now, I would even go like Gretzky 1, Lemieux 2, McDavid 3. Like, there you go. Like, you could even do that. He has 150 points in his last 82 games.
Wow.
I saw that last week. Wow. 17 game point streak, and so he's got a point in every single Oilers game this season. I mean, that's no surprise, but I've never, and I know, like, just Lemieux and Gretzky and everything, like, those guys were sort of out of our era for the big chunk of their careers, but I've never seen someone skate so fast and have the hands that Connor McDavid does, and so he's scoring more goals, by the way, as well. I think that, I know that was a big thing for him in the offseason, to work on his shot, his release, and all of that as well. Like, this guy can just do everything, and I can't give you an exact number, but I mean, if I were to just roughly kind of, spitball it to, top 3 or top 5 for sure. I mean, this guy is a once in a lifetime talent, and it's a pleasure to watch.
Yeah, I mean, I think this conversation starts with, well, who's better all time?
Yeah,
and I think we can agree Gretzky and Lemieux right now are there. Those are the two who right now, like, if Connor were to retire, I'm sorry, but you don't have near, like, 2 points per game. You're not Wayne Gretzky. You're not Mario Lemieux. If you take away all of Wayne's goals, he still has more points than the second place player all time.
One stat that I think separates Gretzky from everyone, and I truly don't think we will see this again, is the 50 and 39.
Yes.
50 goals in 39 games. Like, just...
yeah,
it blows your mind. I mean, you look at the greatest goal scorers, and I think it's a matter of when Alex Ovechkin will break the all-time goals record.
Yeah.
But 50 goals in 39 games, I don't think we'll ever see that again. And so if you want to pick out individual stats, I think that is what separates Gretzky for me. Obviously, Lemieux and his ridiculous point totals. But off the top of my head, man, those would be the only two guys that are better than this guy.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I think there is a fantastic argument for Sidney Crosby to be number 3 all time. So I think right now, it would be safe to say if Crosby retired today, with his 3 Stanley Cups, World Juniors, Olympics, the golden goal, 1.271 points per game over his entire career, all of that, the Rocket Richard, Art Ross, Hart Trophy, etc., etc., etc. I don't think it would be a stretch to say that Sidney Crosby is the 3rd best player to ever play the game, and put Wayne, then Mario, then him. And so in this conversation of Connor McDavid, I want to just give a lot of credit to Sidney Crosby and make the argument that maybe if he were to retire today, Crosby still has to be ahead of Connor all time. And so let me do that quickly now. The first point I want to make is that through their first, or to score their first 500 points, they did it in exactly the same amount of games. And
That's right.
And Crosby had more goals. But what's crazy about Connor is that to get from 500 to 600, it took him 52 games. 52 games. Like that, or
just over half of a regular season.
And so that's ridiculous, right? Like that is absolutely ridiculous. But second point, comparing the two, I want to say, and I saw this the other day on Instagram somewhere. I can't remember exactly who, but they brought it to my attention, something that I forgot about. And by the way, speaking of forgetting, I think people our age, or especially people younger than us, forget how good Sidney Crosby was when he first broke into the league. Like him and Ovechkin were both ridiculous, and Crosby came into the league and started scoring at a rapid pace and hasn't looked back. But what I wanted to say about Sid and comparing him to Connor is that I saw this on Instagram the other day. Like I said, I couldn't remember exactly where it was from, but Sid missed a lot of games between the ages of 23 and 25. And so right now, we are just marveling at Connor McDavid and how good he is. As a 25-year-old, I believe he's 25 right now, might be 26. He's in and around there. I think he's 25, right? I think he's
25.
97. Yep. Yeah. So
our age. Yeah.
So anyway, point is, people are marveling at how good Connor is right now, and as you should, he's incredible. But people forget, first off, how good Sid was in his prime, and secondly, that he actually had to miss a lot of his prime due to concussions. So, that's something I want to bring up because he was so special, and I think a lot of people are quick to say, well, McDavid now is producing at a higher rate than Crosby is all time, and that's what we brought up at the start. Like we said, McDavid right now is 4th all time in points per game, and Crosby is 7th. Mm-hmm. But I think we have to remember those two things. Crosby was ridiculous. People forget. Also, he missed a ton of time in his prime. And the third thing that we have to remember is by the time Sid was 25, he had already won 1 Stanley Cup and then went on to win 2 more.
Yep.
And he had also scored the golden goal in the Olympics. Now, it's no fault.
2010.
That's right. And it's no fault of Connor. He hasn't been able to play in the Olympics yet. But I think when you're talking about the best player all time, the best players all time, like on this list, it has to be a bit more than individual statistics, because I think there is something to be said about a player willing his team to win the Stanley Cup or other incredible feats as well.
Yeah, no, and I'm with you, and I'm actually going to change kind of my side of things a little bit and put Crosby ahead of McDavid, and I think the Stanley Cups in particular is what does it. I mean, McDavid has to win a Stanley Cup at some point, and Edmonton has certainly taken a step this year. We don't know if it's going to be this season, but he is going to win a Stanley Cup at some point. But yeah, I mean, Crosby has 3. He has both the personal and the team accomplishments behind him, and he may not have, like, McDavid is going to end up with more career points than Sidney Crosby. That's very clear. But when you're talking about the perfect all-around player in hockey, I mean, what a model Sidney Crosby is.
That's for sure. And I assume you're talking about defense as well. That's something that Connor, I think, gets a lot of hate for, that he can't play defense. He's always kind of cheating, offensively and whatever, but he's gotten a lot better this year.
That part of his game is still improving. I mean,
Definitely.
There's no question about it. Yes, and we are seeing him be more physical, for example.
That's right. And I think he's gotten better at that this year,
I think so
frankly.
too.
So it's definitely improving, but like just going back to Crosby, and then I'll wrap up by, I guess, giving like my top 5 all time, and we'll see where these guys place definitively. And then, maybe we could even post it and people can critique me or whatever. But I wanted to say that, like, if you were to design a career in the NHL, like if you were to play the very best, be a pro, in NHL 22, like if you were to think of what is the perfect career, I don't think it gets any better than Sidney Crosby's. So,
yes,
like, not only has like you mentioned, he has the individual achievements, but he also has the team achievements, the achievements on the world stage. He got to play with one of his idols growing up, Mario Lemieux. And like, it's just, he plays a defensive game as well. He's able to do it in everywhere. He was the face of the NHL for the longest time, and I think still is. Like, if you ask anybody in Canada who is Sidney Crosby, they're gonna know. And like, there's just so many other things. So I think if you were to model like if you were to think of what is the best career anyone could have in the NHL, like, of course you say like Wayne Gretzky too, right? Because like, he has it all as well. Most points ever and the cups and whatever. But if we're talking post salary cap era, because that's something we have to consider too when talking about these points. Sidney Crosby takes the cake for the best career, I think, all time, and it's still going on. And so with all that said, my top 5 looks like this: Gretzky, number 1, Lemieux, number 2, Crosby, number 3, McDavid, number 4, if he were to retire today.
Yes.
And number 5, I'll say Bobby Orr, because we need to get a defenseman in there. There are a ton of other great forwards as well, but if we're talking about Bobby Orr's production, like, it's just on another planet for defensemen. So we'll throw him in there as well.
Yeah, man, I like that top 5. I really do, and I think we're both in agreement for sure. The one more thing I'll say about Crosby is as well, like, when you're looking at the body that you want as a hockey player, I mean, he's right at the top for me. He's not very tall, but he's wide, he's thick, he's got the big legs, like. That is what you want to look like, Sidney Crosby, if you're a hockey player, and just the strength and everything. And, not to take anything away from, the other 4 in that top 5, but just I look at the shape that Crosby is in. And that's another big thing that sticks out to me as well. And, and credit to him for that's a big part of why he's been so successful in his career. But yeah, I very much like that top 5. It is a special group of men that have played this game.
Definitely.
Alrighty. Well, good stuff, Chad. Looking forward to getting Casey back next week for episode 107. Thanks so much for listening to this one, and we will talk to you again next week.
This has been another episode of Boys in the Booth with Harper Cody, Chad Melbourne, and Casey Abrams. New episodes every Monday on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Connect with the Boys in the Booth on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube at Boys in the Booth. Visit boysinthebooth.com for show details, and don't forget, you can become a patron of the podcast for just $1 a month at www.patreon.com/boysinthebooth.